What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. FA Cup quarterfinals, the focus today. Primarily Manchester City coming from behind to beat Bournemouth. We were very close to a situation where you were going to have a non-Big Six club guaranteed to win both domestic trophies in England, but we're not there yet because Manchester City rallied in the second half after getting outplayed for 45 minutes to defeat Bournemouth and keep their hopes of winning a trophy alive. I want to start at the beginning of this game and then work to the significance of this win because there are some really interesting talking points here from a Manchester City standpoint. But outside of those two rough moments for Tyler Adams that Erling Haaland failed to capitalize on, the handball and the wayward back pass that played Haaland through, that first half was all Bournemouth. Ryan Christie, Tyler Adams dominated the midfield. Semenyo had a field day with Matheus Nunes and Phil Foden in one situation as well. Nunes makes a horrible cross-field pass that then gets picked off that leads to the goal. It was everything you want in a half if you're Bournemouth. Yes, they were able to survive a little bit because that easily could have been 2-1 City. But both teams made mistakes. One team capitalized, the other didn't. On the balance of play, Bournemouth absolutely deserved that lead going into halftime. And part of the reason it appears that Bournemouth got the better of that first half was the lineup that Pep Guardiola fielded and the bigger idea that I came away from this game thinking about after. He brings in Nico O'Reilly, who has played 23 Premier League minutes in his career at halftime, and he's probably the best player on the field in the second half. And Haaland, after wasting his two chances, has to go off. Marmoush comes in. Yes, he got a lot of help from Kepa. That needs to be acknowledged, but he scores the winner. Your two substitutes, your two fresh faces to this team, were the biggest reason why this game tilted so dramatically in Manchester City's favor in the second half and why Manchester City ended up winning. And why they are still alive for a trophy and why they won one of the most important games in their season. You could argue the most important so far, outside of the Champions League knockouts or whatever. But at least domestically, this is probably the most important game they played. And they have Nico O'Reilly and Alvaro Marmoush to thank for that, more than anybody else. Which is a really interesting statement that is worth exploring here. Pep relied on all of the veterans, right? It was De Bruyne, it was Foden, it was Silva, it was Gundogan, it was Kovacic around Haaland in that front six. Still playing Matheus Nunes out of position at right back, even though we sort of know how that's going at this point. And it did not work. He left all of the pure out-and-out wingers on the bench. But once he got some youth, some athleticism on the field in the form of O'Reilly and Marmoush, everything changed. And this has gone on long enough. And even though Manchester City are having a fine season by general standards of what you expect from Big Six clubs, right? If this was Chelsea or Liverpool, well, Liverpool's a little bit different. If this was Liverpool this season, at the beginning, that wouldn't have been shocking. Battling for top four, trying to make sure you make the Champions League, see if you can win a cup. Obviously, it's all changed because of the season Liverpool are having. But relative to the Big Six, they're having a fine season, not relative to Manchester City's expectations. But this is not getting better. There is a clear problem here in the midfield and at right back. And there's a reason why Manchester City went and spent all this money to try and plug some of these holes. bringing in another attacker, another midfielder, some more defenders. No, it has not solved all of the problems, and these players are still getting acclimated. But Marmoush has earned his spot in this team absolutely with what the energy. He just is involved in everything. It seems like when he's on the field, good things are happening. He's consistently contributing. And so, as Manchester City are now clearly going to move forward in the summer, needing to evolve and reboot this, because this group just doesn't have it anymore. That is becoming abundantly clear. There are probably some pieces that can continue. You're going to get Rodri back. That's a big part of this as well. But the next iteration of Manchester City, you might have some of those pieces that are starting to emerge here. And at the very least, the fact that it took Nico O'Reilly, again, 23 Premier League minutes, and Marmoush to rescue this game and to turn it on its head tells you how far Manchester City are from fixing this problem. Unless those end up being the guys moving forward. And you got to get Haaland back into a more confident spot, because in previous seasons, that's probably 2 goals. But he's really struggling from the penalty spot right now. He's not, I know he's scoring a boatload of goals still, but his confidence is not there. The finishing is not at the same level it usually is. There are a lot of problems that need to be addressed here. And so if Manchester City are going to salvage something from this season, if they're going to win the FA Cup, these other pieces that are starting to emerge are going to be part of the reason why. Because when Pep went to the tried and true veterans, they got outplayed by Bournemouth. The game changed when he changed who was on the field. And I feel like that is really telling and something that we should be thinking about and talking about as you get to what does next season look like for Manchester City, what does the summer transfer window look like, what does the next iteration of this look like? Because it is probably still going to be Pep-led, right? There is not as much of a question here of whether he's going to stay next season. He wants to be the one to fix this and get them back on top. Nico Riley is making a strong case that he at least needs an opportunity. I know it's one game, but the contrast between what they looked like with him on the field and him off the field was jarring. And so the bigger picture for the FA Cup in general, they are still obviously very vulnerable. Nottingham Forest is going to get the next crack. They've already beat them. They're a team that can exploit the lack of dynamism in Manchester City's attack this season. Certainly, you felt like this game was a toss-up with Bournemouth. I feel the same way about that one, right? They're right next to each other in the table. Forest are probably slightly better, but there's also just something really weird even now about saying that. And so that is the question in the storyline moving forward in the FA Cup as we get to the semifinals in about a month here. Can Manchester City find a way to survive, to get through, to win a cup? The way that Chelsea have in seasons past, Liverpool have in seasons past, even when they don't win the Premier League. That kind of thing, where it's a good team, you're not shocked they win the cup, but they're not the best team in the league. Or are you going to have one of these situations that I talked about, where a team that's fighting for Europe, and maybe not so much in the case of Crystal Palace, but a team that was expected to be competing for European places and is playing much, much better, playing at that level now? Or is it going to be Villa, who, again, one of the better teams in the Premier League over the past few seasons, into the Champions League, have the Champions League still to worry about, but also one of those teams that would really love to have a domestic trophy to lift, Or Forest, obviously, you kind of cap this season off with an FA Cup. I mean, And this idea of, okay, Newcastle can win. Let's just say, for argument's sake, Forest beat City and go on to win. Newcastle and Forest winning your domestic cups in the same season is a really, really good thing for the Premier League, for the parity, for this idea that anything can happen on any given day. It's what makes these cups fun, is that one game everything can change. Liverpool play their C squad, and they're knocked out by Plymouth Argyle. You have to have this hope of, if you are a team that is not competing for a Premier League trophy, Premier League title, that you can go win a trophy somewhere else. But more often than not, it's still the big six you end up with these trophies. This is the best opportunity, and obviously that has already changed with Newcastle beating Liverpool. And you look at this, and it is very even between these four teams. Of course, you wouldn't be surprised if City go on to win it. You wouldn't be surprised if Nottingham Forest beat City. You wouldn't be surprised if Villa go to win it. You wouldn't be surprised if Crystal Palace find a way to win 2 more games, which is going to make these semifinals really, really interesting. And it's going to set the stage for some really intriguing conversations about Manchester City moving forward. That's really what I came away from this, because I was going to talk about the significance of not having any big 6 clubs left, and then Manchester City came back and won. But the way they did it, to me, is the story. It was Nico Riley. It was Marmoush. It was the guys that you aren't thinking about when you think about this team, that maybe we should be thinking about more, and what that means in whatever this next iteration of Manchester City is going to look like. That is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.